if there's a behavior, there's a belief. And so where did that belief happen? That are you believing that you're no better than, like you don't deserve anything better than, bad relationships, that you've just had a string of bad relationships and you're wondering why? Well, let's go back to when you were 16 or whenever, and you
Right.
were sexually molested by a youth pastor.
Right.
That guy basically sent you the message that you weren't worth anything except a sexual encounter. Hello, everybody. Mike Donahue here with Brian May, and you are on Groomed.Connect. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. Just trying to stay warm out here in
Yeah,
the great Arctic tundra that Nebraska has become here in the past
I
couple
know.
days.
It's crazy. I drove home from DC yesterday, and man, it was freezing cold.
Yeah, yeah,
Freezing cold.
yeah. Single digits. I've been running my dogs, and it's been challenging all of my cold weather gear here. So
I bet. Yeah, my brother and my mom told me that they're getting 2 feet of snow in Boston, up to 2 feet
oh,
of snow.
it's
Yeah,
a lot of snow.
we got a dusting here, but
Yeah,
not like 2 feet. So,
yeah.
woo. Well, I hope everybody's okay and you're hanging in there. Good time to watch podcasts, snuggle up and get yourself some cider, some tea, some honey. Well, Brian, I had a good week. I was in DC actually at a meeting. I was asked to be part of this think tank type thing for schools and decision making and leadership stuff. So it was good. It was a good week. I had a couple of there was a two guys that were in the room that were Assemblies of God ministers. One I did not know, but one I did know, and he's a pretty good guy. So we had a good chat, and some of them, yeah, they made some comments about what I was doing with the podcast, and they knew about it. It's funny because they won't bring it up until I do, and then I did, like, I was like, yeah, I'm on this podcast. Yeah, we know. So, so yeah, people kind of watching, whatever. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's always interesting to get some feedback back from inside the house, if you will, right?
yeah, yeah, it was good. They had some good things to say. This one guy, he's a pastor of Minnesota, so he's got his hands full right now, anyways, with all that stuff that's going on up there. So
Right.
we didn't get too much into the
Yeah.
Jeannie stuff, whatever, but he knows her and he knew my role. So, well, Brian, we wanted to talk today. Last week we talked about sin being sin, quote unquote, being an indicator that there's something wrong, and that the quote I used was that sin is the language of the broken, meaning that if you've got some broken stuff going on in your life, it usually manifests through some sinful behavior, and so that's not always the case, but it seems to be what Jesus kind of highlighted when he was talking about sinners being sick, needing a doctor. So that was a good week, and I had a lot of good input from people. I got some private messages from people thanking me, and good conversations that took place. So yeah, that was good. That was a
Yeah.
good podcast. So, well, this week we wanted to talk about the FBI. So
We did.
we have an FBI article that was sent to us a couple weeks ago, and we've been wanting to talk about it. Brian, why don't you unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah. This actually comes from our friend Ron Blumenkemper at Chi Alpha and the Lion's Den. This is up on his on that website. We'll put a link in the description, and you can get to it today. Um, when I read it, it kind of opened my eyes a little bit. We have talked about all kinds of abuse here. That happens, inside the church and inside that environment. And we've talked a lot about sexual abuse. I mean, I think we started this podcast talking about a case of sexual abuse that was, we were both close to the people involved. Since then, another victim has come forward with a pretty serious allegations of credible allegations of sexual abuse. And I think that in general, until I read this article, I had a pretty narrow definition of sexual abuse in my mind. But it's really opened up my eyes. Ron had talked early on in his process of kind of warn people about Daniel Savala. He talked to some FBI agents and he asked them for a definition of sexual abuse. And that's where this article came from. So I thought it might be useful to talk about this. And the reason I thought is that uh, we're really in an environment, Mike, and we'll talk. There's just so many things popping right now. I mean, so many things happening. I came across a 4-hour podcast on Sean Ryan's podcast. Now, Sean Ryan's pretty big. This particular podcast had gotten almost 600,000 views as of yesterday. And it's about the abuse, the sexual abuse that happened over years and years and years at one of the largest Christian camps in the United States. And we'll talk about that in the weeks to come. But uh, this whole topic of abuse, particularly sexual abuse by clergy, people in the church, is really blowing up across our nation. It's really getting, I think, the light shined on it that it needs to. I mean, we had the whole spotlight thing with the Catholic Church. Then a few years ago, we had the whole blow up in the Southern Baptist Convention, and the hits just keep on coming. And I really think it's an important topic to be relaying. And today I thought if we talked about this, that people maybe, or yourself, people who listen to this may find that perhaps they today don't think they minimize their experience, or maybe they don't think I wasn't a victim of sexual abuse because, I didn't get raped by the senior pastor's wife, something like that. Uh, Maybe there's a little bit broader definition in the way we need to think about this, and ultimately to help people get through the trauma that happens in these situations, find some agency, and if they so choose, to bring some accountability to those people that abuse
Yeah,
them.
yeah. I think the thing that triggered me the most in that movie, The Spotlight, was when there's a part in it where he one of the victims was talking, is being deposed, and he said, um, when a priest asks you, or person of the cloth asks you to do something, it's like God asked you.
Yeah,
It's like, and there's that position that they hold that's more than just another adult. Even in a teacher, I think it even goes higher than a teacher, or sometimes even a family member. This is a person that you really believe has the training and the
right.
integrity and the character and all the above that makes them special, that makes them set apart. And when they ask you to do something, you think it's okay. And that, I think, in the case of, these camps and all the things that are coming out, Chi Alpha, World Rangers, and all that's just the Assemblies of God. But then the other, ministries, like, that's the thing, is that, they were in that special place, that person that asked them to do these things. And I think that's really, I mean, egregious. It's a
Yeah,
special form of a special kind of abuse that goes beyond just, I mean, it's all horrible. It's all
right,
horrible. But
right.
it's just another level to me, and maybe I'm exaggerating it. I don't think I am, but
No, I don't think so. I think we have an expectation of people who claim to be the good guys, right? I mean, they claim to represent God, and most people who haven't been abused by the system would say, well, they must be the good guys. You and I wouldn't necessarily say that anymore, but I think in general that's the model in society. And when the good guys turn out to be the bad guys, then uh, it is it's a whole nother level. So
when I was
uh,
in DC this week, the guy that I was talking to, and this seems to be more of these types of things coming because of what we do on this podcast. And, this guy knows me for years. He felt compelled to tell me a story in his church, that somebody was accused of sexual misconduct, and the way they handled it. He was like, "Well, we did it this way, and we did it by the book, and we called the police right away, and da da da." And I believe him. This particular guy, I believe that. But it's funny now that the narrative used to be, well, we took care of it, and we tried to help the guy, the accused, and whatever. That story's changing.
It is.
People are starting to realize that you got to call the police. I mean, you got to get the police involved if there's
Right.
any kind of sexual stuff like that. But go ahead, Brian.
Right. Right. Yeah. The whole idea of, we're gonna, we're gonna handle this in house, and we're gonna make sure that our own house is clean. That ship has sailed. Um, Even if you're credible, even if you're a good person and you're trying to do the right thing, that is not the way to deal with these things. These things need to be dealt with through channels and brought into the light. Um, if you're going to deal with them in any sort of integrity.
Well, yeah, and even if it's the other way, even if the person's innocent, that serves the person. If you take it to the police and the police find out that the guy was
Right.
wrongfully accused, then that goes in their favor. So, yeah, by covering it up, it just
Right.
it assumes guilt, you know?
Right. Right. It does, and it leaves people open to the questions of the motive of taking that tack of handling it in house, and we've talked ad nauseum about that. Um, I think one of the grossest things that we hear is people saying, "Well, people are going to suffer because they're not going to trust the church anymore." It's like, well, you know what? People are suffering because they trust the church. And so maybe in these particular instances, there's a little bit of healthy skepticism that needs to be brought to bear. So the folks out there that are trying to do the right thing don't have the stink of this all over them. So typically when people think of sexual abuse, um, they think of someone forcing someone else into a sexual act, and that's certainly sexual abuse. But according to these FBI agents that Ron interviewed Ron, it goes far beyond that. And I think that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit here today. Um, what counts, right? What counts? Obviously, I want to go past the obvious kinds of things of what counts. And one of the things I want to just underscore, and you said it, is there's a statement in this article. I'm going to read it. Sexual abuse is less often about sex and more about power and violation. Um, so obviously touching people when they shouldn't be touched or where they shouldn't be touched without their consent, or forcing them into sexual acts, often is, those are the kinds of things that we think of. Um, and we think of that in a lot of different contexts. I think some of the things that we've seen, Mike, that there is this implicit, and you hit on it a minute ago, there's this implicit exploitation that happens because people use the God lever to gain people's trust and win people's trust. And I think you pointed out a very good example of a case where that really is coercion, right? It's coercion by
Right.
saying that, I have power, and I have the kind of power that can't be questioned because it comes from God. And that gives you a certain amount of leverage over people if they buy into that. And that's certainly an element of this. But let me just run down some of these lists. Obviously, unwanted sexual touching, forced contact, sexual acts, exposure. I can remember Ron telling us a story about Daniel Savala. One of the things that in the lore of some of the things that he did is he would just take his clothes off and get undressed in front of other people. Sexual harassment. We've often seen those kinds of things in these cases. Abuse that involves minors, but the key thing here is consent, right? And I'm just going to read right from the article. Consent is freely given. It's informed. There's no lies. It's specific. it's reversible, it's mutual, and um, it consent happens outside of a power dynamic that is unequal. So this whole idea of authority can make can make consent impossible. And I think about one of the victims that we've talked to on this podcast was in a position where his tuition to school was being paid um, by the person who is his alleged abuser. He lived in a place that, he told us anyway that she would buy him clothes and give him money and do all these kinds of things. There is no way in that kind of situation that there could have been any consent. I mean, and no matter what happened there, that any sexual encounter there would have been um, sexual abuse, or as Eileen Fires has counseled us to say, molestation. Um, what do you think
Yeah, I
about that?
think there's still a hesitancy to put it in the same category as an actual, forced rape.
Right,
You know what I mean? It's like we scale it, right?
right,
Because it wasn't, there was some romance involved, there was some whatever, being able to look at it like this was a minor and an adult manipulated the situation to get into a sexual encounter with this person, that's the same thing. That's the same, it's rape. It's statutory rape. They call it that, statutory rape. This is a legal rape. And I think people have to really stop scaling it in your head. Stop
right.
going, well, it's not as bad as, because the person didn't scream out, didn't stop it, didn't whatever, that it's okay. It's not okay. It was they used a power dynamic, they manipulated the situation and they got what they wanted. It was a selfish act and a power act. And I think we've really got to help people with seeing it that way. You got to stop and go, wait, this is just as bad.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to read again from this article. When one person has power, so a mentor, pastor, staff leader, boss, therapist, teacher, etc., sexual behavior becomes automatically contaminated by that imbalance. Even if the victim says yes, it can still be abuse because the authority structure itself creates coercion. Um, and
Yeah.
I think that's what you're saying here, Mike. And um, I'd like to talk for a minute about what you said. We talk about this a lot. People scale their experiences against some of the more horrific kinds of things that we've seen. But abuse is abuse, and scars are scars, and it leaves people with emotional baggage that they have to deal with. And so, one of the things I would just like to say on this podcast to the people who are listening, if you find yourself in this situation, or you know someone who might be in this situation, I would encourage people, if you can, to begin to talk about these things and to begin to examine these incidents, and to begin to really understand. And if you need to do that, with a trusted friend or a therapist, please do that. But really begin to explore what happened to you in the light of what we're talking about here, in the light of this power dynamic. I know we've talked to victims who they're not really sure, even with the extent of things that happened to them, they aren't really sure that they would call it abuse because they didn't necessarily, run away, get up and run out of the room, right? They felt for some reason that they needed to stay and they needed to endure it. They felt that pressure to do it. And sometimes they feel responsible themselves. It's like, well, I took part, so maybe it's not that.
Right. I was just talking actually to Sean. I don't think he would mind me saying this, but I was talking to Sean Weaver, the one that, accused Jeannie of sexual molestation. Uh, and he was still having a trouble with that whole concept of, this being she gave me gifts. She took care of me. She paid my tuition, you know, and not seeing it clearly as that was total manipulation to get what she wanted. And, you know, just getting him to see that as the victim. I mean, he's seeing it. He's starting to really, but he defaults back to, and I think that's part of our good nature, as we
Yep.
default back to, well, it wasn't that bad because I wasn't tied down and beat like some of these, like these sex trafficking stories we hear. And just for a side note, this meeting I was at DC last week, I was sitting next to a lady that has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize because of her work with sex trafficking. Some of the stories that she was telling were horrific. So I get the scale part of it in our
Right.
minds, but you can't see it that way. And I would also say this. I would say that most victims, and I'm gonna speak for Sean too on this, have residual effects that might manifest itself as sin, sin, quote unquote sin, might manifest itself in depression or, suicide ideation. There might be things that you're attributing, to other things that maybe the root of it goes back to this betrayal that you experienced
Right.
with this person of faith, right? Like this minimizing. I'm not one to make people into victims. I don't like when people stay a victim, but you can't fix it unless you feel it. You can't
Right.
fix it unless you examine it and look at the root of it. If there's a behavior, there's a belief. And so where did that belief happen? That are you believing that you're no better than, like you don't deserve anything better than, bad relationships, that you've just had a string of bad relationships and you're wondering why? Well, let's go back to when you was 16 or whenever, and you
Right.
were sexually molested by a youth pastor.
Right.
That guy basically sent you the message that you weren't worth anything except a sexual encounter. That messes with your head. That messes with your psychology and your mental health. And so you've been wrestling maybe with these feelings, and maybe you've acted out. So you feel guilty and you feel shamed because you maybe made some mistakes, but go back to the root of it. It's what Jesus said, right? It's the sick that need a doctor. We keep wanting to beat ourselves up and punish ourselves, but maybe the smart thing to do is go back to the root and look at where this began,
Yeah.
right? And it could have began when you were mistreated by this person that should have
Right.
taken care of you.
Right. 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 And yeah, ultimately, we talked a lot about this last week. Matter of fact, I mean, see some things in my life. I mean, this very day today, I've seen some things in my life. Said, "Well, that's got a root. I need to deal with that." I think that's a lifelong journey with respect to these kinds of things, because when they happen inside a church framework, a faith framework, they often come, I think, with, and again, I'm just an amateur here, so if you're a pro out there and listen to this and want to comment, we'd love to hear from you. But it comes with so much shame and guilt, right? There's just shame and guilt heaped upon people, especially around, especially with younger people, especially around things that have to do with sex and sexual maturity and all of those feelings. There's so much shame and guilt associated with that, and that shame and guilt drives people, I think, into science. And you mentioned a minute ago while you were talking about victimhood, right? I mean, nobody wants to be a victim. Nobody chooses to be a victim. And um, I think sometimes, I can say this for myself. I mean, not from a sexual standpoint, but in a way, our silence and our just, I don't want to say, I want to pick the right word here. Our whatever causes us not to begin to deal with those things that happened, that innately is going to keep us in that position as a victim, because that, you mentioned this continues to manifest in people's lives. It continues to manifest behavior. And I think one of the healthiest things that people can do is begin to examine these things and say, hey, you know what? I really didn't deserve to be treated like that. You know what? That person really did take advantage of me. You know what? It doesn't really matter if I didn't resist hard enough, or I was afraid to resist, or I was young and felt powerless and went along with it. You know what? It doesn't really matter if I was groomed and deceived into this behavior. And at the time it happened, maybe I don't feel about it the way I do today as I reflect on it. Those are all, that's how that's how these abusers get people into the situation. That doesn't have to keep us perpetually tied to that abuse.
And I think you have to be able to separate those those two things. Like you've got to be able to say, like, just I'll just speak for myself. Like it is humbling to admit that I was victimized by this woman, right? By Jeannie, not sexually with me, but with the manipulation and some of the things that she did. And I have found myself in a situation where I did things because of that manipulation. It's hard to admit that, right? And then going back to the stuff that happened in Boston with those guys, right? Admitting that I was sexually molested by these guys. That's not an easy thing to admit. It's not.
Right.
And it feel on the surface, it does feel not wimpy, but it feels um, kind of like you're in a vulnerable position, right? But to be honest with you, now that it's out on the table, it almost empowers me because I have nothing to hide now, right? If somebody wants to judge me based on the fact that I was manipulated as an eighth grader, yeah, maybe I should have known better. Maybe I shouldn't have been in that situation. But I was, and that has a lot to do with the way I was brought up. My dad was gone. There was no there was no protection. There was no protection. My mom was, challenged in her situation. So there wasn't. And I know that. And being able to really unpack that and look at that and go, okay, I did make those mistakes, but I'm not that same person and I can move on from there. And I what I worry about sometimes, Brian, is those people that are still right now are victims of Jeannie Mayo or other people, right?
Yeah.
They've been victimized by her,
Yeah.
either sexually, spiritually. We've heard stories. We don't know if it's true or not, but s- I've heard pretty credible stories that Sean Weaver was not the only one that she crossed the lines with. And we don't know that for sure. So it's alleged, but we've heard that. And I wonder, and I've also heard that, she covered up as the superintendent of schools or in a position of authority in the school, that she covered up sexual predatory behavior from other leaders that she knew about, people that were there, and she covered that up, and so there's shame with that, to be able to be to for that person to come forward and say, "Yeah, that happened to me. I get it." It feels like you're giving power away, but
Right.
it's actually the opposite. You're becoming weaker, I think, because you've got a secret now and this thing talks to you, right? It can haunt you. All that stuff that happened to me in Boston, all that stuff that happened to me with Jeannie, it doesn't haunt me. I wrote it down. I,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
out, it's
Yeah.
out and it's my story and I have a right to it.
Yep.
And if somebody wants to judge me based on my vulnerability and my decision making and my trusting those people, okay, you get to do that. But I don't care. You know, I don't have anything hanging over me. There's no skeletons in my closet. I've made mistakes too, and I've had to look at that too, Brian. I've had to look at the fact that some of that stuff was residual, right? The Boston stuff. I had to deal with some of the things that happened to me there. When I'll just be honest. One of the things that I deal with a lot is if anybody comes at me, like comes in my face and confronts me, I freak out. I still freak out. I get myself out of those situations if I can. I try not to put myself I don't play hockey on a competitive league anymore because it gets a little chippy sometimes, and now I do play on Sunday nights, but it's a pickup league and nobody cares about winning. We just have fun playing hockey. And I love that because when I was playing those other leagues, guys would get a little feisty and get a little, with their sticks, they get a little take some liberties, and I'd get pissed off, and if they came at me, Brian, I would lose my shit. And part of it was because when I was young, I was attacked. And so I
Yeah.
don't do well. I shake, I don't do well. And I've talked to people about it. I've gotten counseling, and I'm pretty I've got but talking about it and being honest about it and putting it out there has been very helpful to me. It's not been my enemy, it's been my friend.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I was never sexually abused, but I mean, we all have things. We talk about this. We all have things in our past that happen to us that we carry with us that cause us to react the way we react. When people try to control me or I feel controlled, I have a similar kind of thing, right? It's like I I get the fight on, and I
Yeah.
push back and I push back hard, and it's not it ain't pretty. When I feel rejection from someone I care about, it's the same kind of a thing, and it's not pretty. And those are all things that I'm dealing with, even today. Uh, and there are some out there that would say, well, you just need to man up and own your own shit. And I think the way you do that is you begin to acknowledge that there's a root there. But when we're talking about people who are victims of sexual abuse, especially in these systems of power that exist in the church, I just want to read a couple comments that Ron made, speaking to victims, speaking specifically to Chi Alpha victims that were reading this, but this holds true for everybody. It wasn't your fault. You weren't stupid. You weren't asking for it. You were targeted. Um, there's no shame in what happened to you. Shame belongs to the abuser and the systems that protect the abusers. Um, I think those are powerful statements. Um, and I think that, Mike, we are in a time in our society, especially in the church world, where people are beginning to be empowered to come out from under the thumb of this system that wants to keep them quiet and to keep them in shame and to keep them in guilt and to try to convince them. You hear so many things, slut shaming. Well, if she wouldn't have dressed like that, then that kind of a thing. Yeah, I'm just calling bullshit on that right now. Those days are gone. That dog doesn't hunt. Abusers will continually try to put the blame on their victims, and the systems that support abusers will do the same thing. And we understand why they do that. We understand why these systems do that, because they feel like they've got to present their reputation, protect their reputation. Just go out there and look at how many victims signed NDAs with organizations like this that were here, take some money, but shut up, don't ever talk about this again.
Right.
Um, to me, for a church to do that, for a faith organization to do that, that is just that heinous. That's heinous. I mean, that just disqualifies people from claiming they belong to a healthy, beneficial community.
Yeah, you look at the example of Jesus Christ when they dragged that prostitute out in front of him to trap him, and these were all, men of God that were accusing her, and they're about to stone her. They were gonna kill her,
Yeah,
to prove a point, and legally, they had the right, according to the Mosaic law, they could do that. And what happened? Jesus was the first slut shaming that we see in the Bible that I remember, at least in the New Testament. And Jesus took care of it by turning the tables on them and making them look at their own heart. I don't know what he wrote in the sand. I think he wrote, "I know what you did last summer." I still know what you did last summer. No. But he might have wrote down their sins. He might have wrote down times and dates they slept with her. Who knows?
yeah,
But all I know is that from the oldest to the youngest, so it was sequential. They walked away, and so what was he doing there? He was saying, "You can't use the system to hurt people. Stop using the system to hurt people, whether it's to trap me or to hurt her or use her as a pawn. you don't get it, and these guys, went to those lengths. And so does the church today, Brian. They're still doing it. They're still covering up, sexual sin and other things that are going on. Yeah, I mean, just to protect a reputation, protect a brand, protect their church, protect, their power. And it's just, it's anti-Jesus.
Right. It is, and I think that's a great example. Is that um, those men that were getting ready to stone that woman? Their leverage was shame and guilt and fear, because they were part of the system that I mean, that was the power dynamic. That was the system. They were the ones in power. They were going to virtue signal, by stoning this woman to death. And one by one, I love that story. I mean, because one by one, Jesus picked them off. And he said, hey, you know what? Let's take a good hard look at this. Let's pull the covers back and let's see what the facts are. And that's really, I think, what's happening today, Mike. I
Yeah.
think the tables are being turned. Another biblical metaphor there, but the tables are being turned on these systems, and victims are finding a voice.
Yeah.
And 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 I am. Mike and I talk about this offline all the time. I am. I am a champion of wanting to hold these systems accountable, and seeing these systems sources of power dry up so that they can just shut up and go away and quit hurting people.
Yeah.
I want nothing more than to see that happen in my lifetime. But more than that, I want to see these people who've been hurt, your friends, your neighbors, your brothers, your sisters, your children, your parents, find a voice so they can stand up. Much like you did, Mike. I mean, you lived under that scar, that specter of abuse that was brought upon you. You didn't ask for it. It wasn't your fault, but it was a part of your life, and you had to find your way out from under that. And you are in a better place in your life because of it. That's what I just long to see happen for people who, especially folks who've been victimized by these systems we've talked about, these church systems that they've lost their way. They've become corrupt. They care more about their image and continuing to have their platform than they do about the human, the people they've left lying along the landscape in the wake of their own ego and desire and ambition.
I'm still waiting for pastors in the church to stop crying about being attacked by the world. Their response to all this, people coming at them and trying to hold them accountable now is, you sent me that quote, that reel from Chuck Swindoll,
Yeah.
and I like Chuck Swindoll, but, just this whole idea that we're being attacked, and the
Yeah.
men and women of God. What I'd really like to see, Brian, is some of those guys like Chuck Swindoll and other, pastors with big names, to call out the sin of their contemporaries, to call it
Yep.
out, to stop, you know, looking at it as we're losing because of the attacks, but look at it as we're losing because of this inside cancer, this sin in the house, this sin in the house of God, this cancer.
Yeah.
And instead of cleaning out the cancer, they want to blame the doctor, right? They want to blame, they want to blame the person that's given the diagnosis. Well, the world is talking.
Yep.
The world is talking. We're
Yep.
trying to tell you, Pastor, that there's sin in the house. We're
Yep.
trying to tell you, Chuck, that there's sin in the house, and it's manifested all over the place.
Yep.
And when you put your blinders on and you pretend you don't see it, you're losing credibility that way. That's
Yeah.
what's making you lose credibility. I like Stephen A. Smith. I don't like everything he says because he's a Yankees fan, but there was one time where somebody was calling out racism that I don't know if it was or not, but I liked what he said. He looked back at the person that was accusing this person, and he said, "Wait, you took money from this guy." And he pushed back at this person and basically said, "You can't have it both ways. You can't get the money and then cry racism. You should never, if you knew all along it was racism, but you took the money anyways, you're just as guilty." I love when leaders do that. I love when leaders hold other leaders accountable and say, "Hey, you can't, you can't do that." Right? So, pastors, I'm just asking you to stop being on the defense and look what we see.
Yeah.
I'm not some hurt guy that's like, "Oh, I'm just pissed at the church and I'm just gonna go do whatever I can to take it down." No, I'm beyond that, man. I've got a life. I've got things going on. I'm working in schools. I have fun. I have a fun life. I like my life. I'm not sitting here in this podcast crying about my life. I have a great life. I'm just really wanting to see, Brian, I really want to see revival in the church. I really do. The right kind of revival. Not this hyper bullshit that's like sensationalism, but real repentance, real Psalms 52 repentance, where you're repenting for your motives. You're repenting for your heart that isn't right. I don't care about the actions. I don't care. I do, but I mean, that's all like that's all symptoms. Going back to the motive of your heart, pastor, go back and examine that,
Yeah.
and examine it in your brothers and call them out and have the guts to call them out when you see it violated.
Yeah.
Other than that, if that doesn't happen, this ship's gonna sink. It's going down. And it's
Yeah.
not because the woke movement showed up. It's because accountability showed up.
Right. Right. And if that's the case, it needs to sink. That Chuck Swindoll reel I sent you. I don't particularly have opinion nowadays of Chuck Swindoll. I don't know what he's been doing, but um, what struck me about that was he was basically standing up talking to people graduating from a seminary, a certain school, saying that, people are going to attack you just because of your title. People are going to attack you. Number one, that is just blatant, gross elitism. He's like saying you're so special that you're going to have a target on your back and that, people are going to come after you because you're a threat to them. Well, whatever. But why I really reacted to that is I want to see people like Chuck Swindoll stand up and say, you know what? The church is getting a lot of heat. And there's a reason the church is getting a lot of heat.
Put a mirror up.
Yep. There's three more fingers pointing back at us. We need to take a look at why our reputation in society is waning. We
Yeah.
must be doing something wrong. Um, and I'll talk about Jesus a little bit. I mean, again, I'm not a Bible scholar, but if I read the Gospels, what I see in there is that the people who are out of power, the people who were downtrodden, the people who were victimized, the poor folks, the women who were, marginalized in society, they liked him. They liked his message. They heard what he had to say. The people that hated him and the people that ended up murdering him were the people in power
Yeah.
because he threatened their power base.
Right.
And so, to me, if the church is going to regain any legitimacy, and I mean, I'll say right now, I mean, you can call me a cynic, but I, I don't see a lot of hope for that happening, apart from just a huge, massive shift. But if the church is going to regain legitimacy in society, that's what they're going to have to look like. They're going to have to be for the people who are victimized by these systems of power. They can no longer be one of the systems of power that victimize people. That's the
Right.
turn that I'm looking for. If you want to call that revival, we can call that revival. But call it what you may. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I want to see.
Yeah. And Jesus illustrated that by picking up a rag and washing some feet. And he said, you want power? This is
Yeah.
power.
Yeah.
This is power. And we use that story as symbolism. And I've seen pastors use that to manipulate, people in their congregation to get them to wash their feet. But No, pastor, you're supposed to do that. That's what you're supposed to do. You're
Right.
supposed to be the servant of all, right? You wanna be powerful? Pick up a
Right.
rag, dude,
Yeah.
and go serve the people.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeremy DeWirt, pick up a rag, right? How
Yeah.
much money you make, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Somebody should find out what these pastors are making. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah.
You got people in his church, single moms that are making 45, 50,000 a year, and
Yeah.
he's driving around on his Denali making probably maybe even, I don't know. I don't know, but it just makes me crazy when I think about that, how much these guys make.
Yeah. Well, I'm. There's a podcast right there. We can
We should do
let-
some examination. I think you can find out. I think there's some.
we can put a pin in that and come back to that because that's a whole nother that's a whole nother series of rants.
Yeah. Hey, Rick Lorman, how much money you make?
Right. Right.
Didn't
Right.
Gary Hoyt get like a 5-year severance package or something like that? 5 years. Wasn't working at the church, but they collected for 5 years, something like that after they left.
Yeah, I'm
Who
not sure. I've heard different stories around that, but you know, I
come
just
tell us. How much
I
did you make, Gary?
yeah. Yeah, come on, tell us. So,
Sick.
yeah. So, just again as we wrap this up, we've said this a lot of times on the podcast, but with respect to just the breadth of the definition of what sexual abuse or really any other abuse might have been, and to the extent that the levers of guilt or shame or doubt have been levered against you as a victim, the simplest way I can say it is that, you know what, it wasn't you, it
Right.
was them.
Right.
And I guess that's all I've got to say about that today, Mike.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you giving us some enlightenment on that article. And one more time, for those of you that have been victimized, we're not asking you to come on this podcast. This isn't a plea to come on the podcast. I mean, if you want to, you certainly can, but that's not the idea. The idea is that you come forward and hold these people accountable. I know some of you walk in fear of that, and maybe you feel compelled or convicted not to, and that's a real God thing. Like you really feel like God said, don't hide behind the God thing. Don't say God said if he didn't. I mean, you're the only one that can really know your heart on that. But I'm just telling you from my own experience, being coming out with it and saying this is how it affected me brought me liberation, not isolation. It's
Yeah.
done the opposite. It's
Right.
actually made me free, and I can use it to make a difference in other people's lives instead of, hiding and feeling shameful about it. I don't feel shameful about it at all. I really don't. And
Yeah.
it's because I've been able to get it out and talk about it. So I encourage you, Brian and I both encourage you, if you've been victimized, um, talk to somebody, don't hide it, you know? And again, if you wanna come on, you can, but that's not the issue. The
Right.
issue is, you, getting it out and facing it. Don't let it harass you. Don't let it, bring shame in your life. Don't let it manifest in other ways. Take care of it, and we'll help you. I mean, you can call us privately and, we'd love to chat with you. So,
Yeah.
all right, Brian. Tomorrow is the Patriots game. Those of you you're probably watching this on a
Right.
Sunday after the game or whatever, but hopefully the Patriots. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say the Patriots won. Woo, Patriots!
Well, we're facing a former backup quarterback who's now in Broncos uniform. I
Yeah,
am
but he
a
was there for like a minute, wasn't he? He wasn't there long.
Right, right. And listen, for those of you who don't understand, I mean, I was born there. I have my roots there. Mike has a way deeper connections. But if there's anything true about a Boston sports fan, is that we are eternal pessimists. So nobody's going to be celebrating over here until, the last minute ticks off the clock and we got more points than the other guy. But
Yeah,
man,
I
I'm
get mad when people tell me like I'm a bandwagon guy. I followed Steve Grogan back in the '70s, okay, and
right,
Jim Plunkett when he was there for 10 minutes. Yeah,
right, right. Yeah, yeah. We both lived through the lean
yeah.
years. So
I've been to that stadium when it was Shea Stadium. I think it was Shea or something like that, and it was like they had a jail. Brian, it was so bad, they had a courtroom in the stadium, so when they so many fights and beer brawls that they would just arraign them. They'd do arraignments right there at the stadium so they
that's
could release those people.
that is classic.
I had a
That's
judge
classic.
right there. Yeah. We've had our tough times, so,
That's right.
yeah. We
That's
are
right.
spoiled children, though. I mean, how many did we win? 6 under Brady?
6 under Brady.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we gotten this far,
Yeah.
but hey,
All right.
go
Go
hey,
Pats.
all you haters, hate
You
us.
haters. Go F yourself. I'm just kidding. All right. I'll probably edit that out. All right, guys, have fun, everybody.
All right. Have a good one.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.